Lovely, thank you very much for the welcome this morning. It's good to be with you. And so I'm just going to get my screen open here. Right, so I'm hoping that, thank you tech guys. So just whilst we're getting that on the screen, well, brilliant, thank you. Hopefully brilliant. So I'm going to skip over the first few slides because we've already done who I am, but I'll leave it on the screen just as an aid memoir. But yes, I come back to the UK every year or so. It was the last time I was on home assignment was October of 2024, so it's been 18 months since I've last done talks like this about the work at the hospital. So I'm mainly focusing on what's happened in the last 18 months, but I am going to go right back to where Chad is and some basics about the hospital before I then launch into the specifics of what's happened, particularly in the last 18 months. Firstly, just a thank you to you as a church for supporting me as a mission worker with BMS and also supporting the organisation of BMS as a whole. We wouldn't be able to do the work that we do overseas without the support of many Baptist churches around the country. So thank you for that and your part in the work. So just in case you don't know where Chad is, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, I didn't know where it was before I started living there. It is there where the red arrow is pointing, totally landlocked. And I am from Torquay in South Devon, so right on the coast. So living in a landlocked country has been quite a challenge, really. I didn't expect it to be as challenging from that point of view as it is, but it's totally landlocked. The top third of the country is in the Sahara Desert. The top 2/3, and the bottom third is in a region called the Sahel, which traverses across from west to East Africa. And N'Djamena is which is the capital, is in the bottom third of the country and very much on the western border with Cameroon. Probably can't see it on the screen there too much, but it borders six different countries border Chad. So you've got Libya directly to the north, then there's Sudan to the east, Central African Republic to the southeast, Cameroon to the southwest, and then Nigeria and Niger to the west. So it's kind of dropped out of the news here. I've noticed. I've been back for about 4 or 5 weeks now. The civil war in Sudan, you may not have even heard about it, but it is still ongoing, and there are many refugees that have fled over the border into eastern Chad. There are, I think, at the last count, 1.3 million refugees in the east of Chad in 3 refugee camps. It's mainly women and children, and so Chad, on top of its other challenges of the country, which I will go into, is also hosting 1.3 Sudanese refugees. A little bit about Chad as a country, if you don't know already. The official languages are French and Chadian Arabic. So the hospital functions in French, all our notes, all the communication is all in French. However, just because of where it's situated, the majority of our patients actually speak Chadian Arabic. There are also in Chad about 120, 130 local village languages as well. So our Chadian staff, I'll mention them later, they all speak French and Chadian Arabic and at least 2 of the local village languages. So the fact that I've learned French to live and work there doesn't really mean anything when they already speak 4 languages. So Islam is the main religion of Chad. 55% of the population are Muslim. Around 40% are Christian, however, only 10% are evangelical Christian. The average life expectancy is 55 years old. There are people that live a lot older than that, but as I'll touch on in the next slide, there is unfortunately a lot of death amongst children and young people, so that then brings the average life expectancy of the whole country down. Now, this wouldn't be a talk in the UK without a mention of the weather, because we love talking about the weather, don't we? So the last bullet point there is about the weather in Chad. So there are 3 main seasons in the country. So there's the hot and dry hot season, which is April and May. It's just come into an end now. And that is when it gets up to 45 degrees in the day, 35 at night. It's hot. And then the rains come. There's one rainy season from June, it's just starting, and runs until September into October. So the temperature does get a little bit cooler, but it's obviously very wet and humid at that point. And then at the end of the year and into the new year is the coldest time of Chad, when it is slightly cooler and it's dry again. And if you think back to 2 weeks ago when there was the heat wave here and it was up to 30, 32 degrees, that is the same temperature as cold season in Chad. So what you experienced 2 weeks ago is the coldest weather it gets in Chad, just to give a bit of perspective. So some health and development statistics of the country. So the UN does something called the Human Development Index, which also known as the HDI, which is an indicator of poverty. And the most recent one was done in 2023. And they looked at 193 countries around the world. And they take into account things like life expectancy, level of education, average income. There's loads of metrics they take into account of these 193 countries. And on that scale, Chad ranks 190th out of 193, which makes it the fourth poorest country in the world. And I've put in brackets in red there, the equivalents for the UK, just for comparison. Now, these next 3 bullet points that I'm going to read out are shocking statistics. They're not easy for me to read and for you to listen and hear. They are improving. I use this slide on all my home assignment talks that I've done over the last 10 years, and I update them with the latest stats. And so it's great to be able to see things improving and the rates going down, but they are still shocking and not great compared to the rest of the world. So the infant mortality rate is the death of a child before their first birthday. And for every 1,000 live births in Chad, 59 of those children will pass away before they reach their first birthday. The under 5 mortality rate is the death of a child before their 5th birthday. And for every 1,000 live births in Chad, 101 of those children will pass away before they reach the age of 5. And then finally, the maternal mortality rate. For every 100,000 live births in Chad, 748 of those mums will pass away within 6 weeks of having her baby. And that is still, unfortunately, the second worst maternal mortality rate in the world, and tends to be related to postpartum bleeding. And it's against this backdrop of shocking health and development statistics, along with many other illnesses and accidents that occur in Chad, that Guinebor 2 Hospital, often referred to as G2, is working to try and provide good quality, affordable healthcare to the local population, while also trying to take care of their spiritual health as well. And I will touch on that briefly a bit later. So these pictures show the hospital from the air. Unfortunately, I haven't got a more up-to-date photo than 2023, but I've put these in just to kind of show how the population has increased around the hospital. It only opened at the end of 2010, so it is only 15 and a half years old. So it's quite young for a mission hospital comparative to a lot of others. And in 2010, when it first opened, there was nothing else around the hospital. So you look at the picture of 2016 on the left-hand side there, the big rectangle is the hospital compound, and then outside there were a few buildings, but there was even less in 2010. And in 2016 there were those, and then in 2023 you can see the picture on the right. It's taken from 180 degrees different angle, but you can see how much the population has increased, and that's mainly residential housing that has been built up around the hospital. And the bit on the bottom of the picture of 2023, that is all now built on as well. The land there is all residential housing. So I'm not going to read out all of these bullet points, but just to give you an idea of the different departments, the different services that we provide at Guinebor. And then this is showing the amount of work that we do every year. So these are the 2025 monthly averages with the 2024 monthly averages in brackets to compare. And every time I come back on home assignment, I say, oh, we were busier last year than we were the year before. That's been the trajectory for the hospital. Since it opened, that more and more people are coming to have healthcare at G2, and that's great. That's what we're there for. And I want to particularly highlight the work with pregnant ladies and young women. Obviously, on the previous slide, I talked about the shocking maternal mortality rate and the infant and child mortality. And at the end of 2025, the average number of babies born, even though the average for the whole year, you'll see on the second column, the right-hand column, the second bullet point up, on average over the whole year, we had a monthly average of 240 babies born across the whole of 25. But in the last quarter, so October, November and December, we actually had 300 babies born every month. So that's a good sign. That people are coming to have their babies in hospital, and that increase continued on into the beginning of 2026. And linked with this is the amount of ladies coming for prenatal care and the number of childhood vaccines which have been given, which have all increased. And there are many possible reasons for this increase, not just for the maternal care, but also the hospital in general. I've already mentioned the population growth around the hospital, so there just are more people that live in the vicinity and that come. They're particularly focused on the maternal and child health. There is more awareness in the community, particularly about giving birth in hospital, that it is best to do that and not give birth at home. We have a community outreach program that has been targeting women and young children for quite a number of years, and that seems to be bearing fruit. And another reason for the increase in the amount of patients generally is that the last part of the road out of the capital to the hospital is now tarred. Now you might be wondering why I do get very excited about the tarred road. And I've spent the last 9 rainy seasons I live at the hospital. There's residential housing there, so I don't have to do so much travelling as the Chadian staff do. But it's pretty stressful having to kind of navigate your way out, and is the pothole, how deep is the water, and am I going to get stuck in the mud and all that. So the fact that the area the hospital is in now has tarred road within about 500 metres is great, and that has obviously meant that people can get to us a lot more easily. A little bit more about the tarred road later, because it is an exciting development for the hospital. And this, if you're more into graphs rather than just seeing numbers on a screen, just shows from 2020 to 2025 the increase in the numbers of births at G2. Okay, I'm now going to touch on a few of the kind of challenges that we've had over the last 18 months. BMS like us to kind of share the challenges and then the solutions that we've put in place for those challenges. So the first couple are linked with my role on the management team. The earlier slide said I'm a pharmacist, but I'm also a member of the senior management team, and that has taken latterly, in the latter few years, a lot more of my time than the pharmacy work has. And as well as growing in numbers physically at the hospital, this has had an obvious knock-on effect to the finances and the finance management. There is no NHS equivalent in Chad. There's no free healthcare. Doesn't matter what health institution you go to, you pay, varying degrees depending on whether it's super private or government run. The G2 hospital is classed as a private hospital, but because it's a non-government organisation and non-profit, obviously we keep our prices as low as we can to try and enable patients to be able to come. We don't turn anyone away if they haven't got money, but we do ask people to pay what they can in that situation. And the money that we get from the patient fees keeps us functioning day to day, pays the staff bill. That's always the highest bill for any health establishment around the world. It helps us to buy drugs, lab reagents, cleaning products, everything to keep the hospital running on a day-to-day basis. And on my last home assignment, I didn't come here and speak, but I did let people know about the new finance procedures that we put in place that were better for the size of the hospital. Before, we were, oh yeah, we're quite a small organisation, and then someone came in and said, you're not small, you're not a small non-profit business, you are a medium-sized non-profit business, which was quite a shock to us on the management team. We had to put a lot more procedures in place for that, and these were mainly around managing expenses. And at the start of 2025, the management team was advised that the existing IT system that had only been in place since 2022 was not going to fulfill our finance management and reporting obligations. And so in March of 2025, we implemented the commercial module of SAGE. Those of you in the finance world will know SAGE, or SAGE, it's pronounced in French. And we decided to put this in place for finance management. So both for cash management, Chad is a cash society. There's like 2 supermarkets in N'Djamena that take card. Everything else, all other transactions are done in cash. So we take a lot of cash at our cashier desks. And so this finance module has helped us to manage that better than before. And it's also helped us to manage the pharmacy stock. And obviously that's where I have come in to it more. And so this photo shows us at the end of a very long Saturday in March of last year, after having implemented the new IT system. And this is a picture of earlier in the day when we had members of the admin and finance team, the pharmacy team, along with the IT trainers, in to have a morning of training on the new system. So that took a while, as all these things do, to bed in, but the impact of that was good. It has meant that we are better organised and have better control over our finances. There is more accurate finance reporting and more accurate pharmacy stock reporting, and we have our accounts audited every year, and we had our external auditor in February, and were able to provide him with all the reports he wanted from SAGE, so that was good. He was happy, so we were happy. Okay. Something else that I never envisaged, when you go overseas like I do, you kind of go with a bit of an open job description, and you never quite know what you're going to end up getting involved in. And I've learned more about solar power than I ever thought I ever wanted to know or wished to know about. So I have been part of the team that has been keeping the solar power on and running. And we've had solar pretty much since the start of the hospital, and probably since about 2012. There is mains power in Guinebor 2 now, probably since about 2015, but in order for the hospital to be connected into it, we would have to spend a load of money getting our own substation, and we'd have to pay for that, and it's just expensive, and the electricity is fairly expensive and is not that reliable. So we have decided to stay independent and autonomous for our power needs, and so we make the most of the abundant sunshine that Chad has pretty much all year round, apart from in rainy season. And in March of 2023, we had a newer solar power system installed, but fairly quickly it turned out that it wasn't going to meet the demand, because demand has increased. As I've said, the hospital is getting busier, we're doing more surgery, we're generally seeing more patients, and there are higher demands from the patients, because when the hospital first was built, as I said, when we were looking at the aerial shots, the hospital was kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was out in the bush, it was out on the outskirts of N'Djamena, the capital. But with the population growth, the capital has expanded, and Guinebor 2, the name of it was a village, and that's where the hospital gets its name. It was a village on the outskirts of the capital, N'Djamena, at the beginning, was seen as in the bush. But with the growth of the capital, and it's expanded out a lot, as you saw in the second aerial picture, then it is now basically Guinebor 2 is a suburb of N'Djamena. We're not out in the bush anymore, and so there are inherent expectations that come with that from the patients, because we're not a hospital in the bush anymore, we're a hospital of the capital city, and so they have higher expectations of the power that we should be able to, electricity that we should be able to supply them. But however, some of the components of that system started to unfortunately malfunction, despite being under air conditioning 24 hours a day. And so the solution was to find an external donor. We haven't got the ability to use the patient fees to fund higher expense things like this. So if we need something like this, then that's when we go to external funders. And so a donor from Hungary actually was found to give us money to add extra capacity to the solar power system, and that was installed at the end of the end of 24 and into the start of 2025. Alongside that, the management team, we save each month for solar-related equipment. Obviously, it is our backbone for energy supply, and so it needs to be working all the time to keep the lights on, literally. And so we save money just in case things malfunction or we need to add bits of equipment. And we are able to use that fund to buy a couple of new lithium batteries in the middle of last year to add a bit more capacity to the original solar power. And this picture shows the solar power panels that keep the hospital functioning. There are 177 of them there, and we do have extra on some of the roofs of some of the buildings of the hospital as well. And so the impact of all of this in cold seasons, the demand goes down. People don't have a fan on when it's only 30 degrees, and because it's cold compared to 45. So we were able to generate sufficient power in cold season just from the solar. However, in hot season, obviously the demand goes up in terms of everyone wants to plug their fans in. There are very few areas of the hospital that are under air conditioning. Obviously, if there's an emergency operation in theatre overnight, then that increases demand, and sometimes we do have a diesel generator backup, and that goes on if need be. Now into a little bit of some of the clinical developments that we've done in the last 18 months since I was last on here in the UK. So the first one I'm going to touch on is prosthetics and orthotics, which we refer to as P&O because it gets to be a bit of a mouthful otherwise. And for those of you who aren't in the medical field, a prosthesis is a false lower limb, and an orthosis is a support, either temporary or permanent, for those who have a limb injury or disability. And road traffic accidents are the second highest reason for admission to A&E at G2. And the hospital has a sought-after surgical program already and physiotherapy department. And the surgeons at G2 do around 35 leg amputations per year. And that's obviously just our hospital. There are other amputations done at other hospitals in and around the capital and elsewhere. And however, there are only 6 P&O technicians in the whole country, operating out of 2 centres, one in N'Djamena, one in Mundu, which is a city further south. So in January of 2025, so 18 months ago, the Hamlet family arrived from the UK. They are also supported by BMS. And Roger and Ingrid, with their 2 boys, Mark and Joel, joined us. Roger and Ingrid are both prosthetist orthotists. Roger focuses more on prosthetics and Ingrid more on orthotics. And after settling their family in, they have been working on starting the P&O department from absolutely nothing, literally. And so the whole of last year was dedicated to research and initial fundraising. And the goal eventually is to have Chadians trained up to take over from Roger and Ingrid when they leave. And the first part of their department is just going up, this little building which is being built on the back of the physiotherapy department. There's a door linking the two, because obviously they're going to work very closely together with the physios. So this was taken in April, just before I left to come back to the UK for this home assignment. And this will give Roger and Ingrid some clinical and workshop space to start doing some basic orthotics and prosthetic making them from scratch. So the impact of that will mean increased P&O availability in Chad. And we've obviously increased the number of technicians from 6 to 8 with the arrival of Roger and Ingrid into the country. And our patients specifically at G2 will have easier access to P&O care. The last clinical department I wanted to mention is audiology. So there is very little provision for treatment of ear issues in Chad. And solution to that is that G2 has partnered with a small Swiss NGO, non-government organisation called Écoute-moi. For those of you who don't speak French, that means listen to me. And Écoute-moi already has a small clinic in N'Djamena and supports a deaf school in the city. But they wanted to expand their reach and be based in a hospital setting as well. And so they approached us on the management team in 2024 to see if we could set up a partnership between Écoute-moi and G2. So a fledgling outpatient department of audiology, was started in 2025, and they are able to test the hearing of newborn babies. They're able to do general hearing tests for adults and children. And they were just in a temporary room at that point, and in January of this year, a team from Écoute-moi in Switzerland, they're based in Switzerland and just come a couple of times a year to Chad. They visited and set up a department in their own building that was made from a shipping container. And the picture on the left is the shipping container arriving, and it came from South Africa, and inside that container there was everything they needed to set up the department. So the windows, the doors, the soundproofing, internal walls, some equipment, an air conditioner, because a shipping container in Chad is very hot inside. And so everything arrived in the container on the left-hand side there, and in that 2-week period that they were there, they transformed it into the picture, what you can see in the picture on the right. The impact of that has obviously meant more provision of simple audiology services in N'Djamena. Babies can be referred to other centres if they're found to have a hearing impairment, and Écoute-moi hope to be able to provide hearing aids at G2 in the future. They're taking things very slowly, which is always the best way to go with developing anything overseas in a country like Chad. Take things slow and then build onto it. I've mentioned the management team a few times, so I thought I would introduce you to the motley crew. That is us, the 6 of us that manage the hospital on a day-to-day basis under direction of the hospital board. And there are 6 of us from 5 different countries, so that makes for interesting meetings. We don't all have the same first language, but we conduct the meetings in French generally. And it's a good cross-cultural mix of people. So on the left-hand side there is Debbie, and she and her husband initially started the hospital back in the early 2000s, and she's from the USA and is a midwife. And then there's Agnes, who is the head nurse, kind of the matron. There's not really an equivalent in English for the role that she does, but she's a nurse by background and is now the matron of the hospital. She's from Chad. Then next to her is Kalbasu, and he is from Cameroon. He is the hospital general director, and he is also an advanced nurse surgeon, does a lot of orthopedic surgery, including most of the amputations I mentioned earlier. Then next to him is Alain, who is Chadian as well, and he's the administrator. Then there's me, who's British, and then next to me is Lucia, who is the finance and projects manager, and she is from Brazil. So that's us, and we meet weekly on a Friday morning and keep the show on the road. But despite our weaknesses and failings, God is still in control and keeps things functioning despite our weaknesses. So very grateful for that. Okay, so the new tarred road. I know you're probably like, why the heck is she getting so excited about this road? But it has made a massive difference to us at G2. It's taken a lot of stress in rainy season out of getting to and from N'Djamena for the staff, like I mentioned, for getting to and fro to work. Patients can obviously get to us a lot easier as well. It's been a real blessing. So we can have the video now, please. That would be great. So it's just a couple minutes long, just showing the last little bit so it's leaving from the hospital and then gets out to the tarred road. So this will give me a little bit of a water break whilst you watch that. Thank you. Thank you for playing the video. So yeah, that's made a massive difference. And when I get back to Chad in the middle of July, the rains will have well and truly started. That dirt track that you saw at the very beginning will all be mud and water. So it's just nice that we've only got that to contend with now before we get to the tarred road. So no talk about a hospital would be complete without mentioning at least one of the thousands of patients that we see. And so yes, sorry, I should have warned you before this came up. There are going to be slides with x-rays, and the next few slides will have like screws going through bones on an x-ray. So if you're not keen on seeing that, look down and just listen to me as I tell you about Khadija. So Khadija, that's not her real name. Was knocked over by a motorbike in March of 2025, and she was 8 years old at the time. And unfortunately, that's not an unusual occurrence to have people knocked over by motos. And both of her legs were broken, and her family took her to another hospital in N'Djamena, where both of her legs were put in traction for 5 days. And I'm unsure why she left the hospital after just 5 days, but that is what happened. And her left leg actually healed fairly well. It's the inverse on the x-ray, so the bone on the right-hand side is her left leg. But the right leg started to heal at a bit of a strange angle. And her paternal uncle decided to bring her to Guinebor, as he'd heard that Kalbasu, who you met in the middle of that management team picture, he'd heard that he was good at fixing broken bones. And so he brought Khadija to see Kalbasu in the surgery clinic in August of 2025, so 5 months after the original accident. Kalbasu looked at the x-ray, which is the one on the slide there, and said to her uncle that he would have to re-break the bone, align it, and then pin it with screws and plates. And he warned the uncle that her right leg may end up being a little bit shorter than the left as a result. At this point, Khadija couldn't walk. She was carried into the surgery clinic by her brother, and her uncle was keen that she be able to walk and live a normal life. And so he consented to the surgery. Paternal uncles have a lot of rights culturally in Chad, so he was able to do that. And so at the end of August last year, she came to us and had surgery by Kalbasu, and was then hospitalised for a couple of weeks. So this is her x-ray immediately post-op. You can see the screws and the plates there, and there's kind of like a V in the middle of the screws and plates, which is where the bone was broken. And that's how she was immediately post-op, and she stayed with us for a couple of weeks to learn how to walk with a walker and then with crutches with our physios. And then she went home and had follow-up in the outpatient clinic every 3 to 4 months. And the most recent follow-up she had was in April of this year, which was 8 months post-op. And this is the x-ray from that point. So you can see that V of where there was no bone is now gone, so it's all healed up. And everyone's very happy with the result. No one more so than Khadija and her family. So she can walk well. Her uncle says that she can run, keeps up with her cousins and her siblings. And the family is really happy with the result. So that's her x-ray, and this is Khadija herself in April, standing on 2 feet. So that's great news. Pray for this family, that they would question not just the medical care provided at G2, but also why we do it. The uncle is in contact with a lot of Christians through his work, but is himself a devout Muslim. So pray that his eyes would be open to truth. Right, I'm just going to take a break now. I'm almost finished on the talk. I've got just some prayer points, but before I get to that, I'm just going to share a quick devotion. It's only going to be like 5 to 7 minutes, and it's based on Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6, which a lot of you probably know off the top of your head, and I'll read it in a little bit. But I've entitled this devotion "Living Simply and Gratefully." So what are you thankful for right now? Take a moment to reflect and think about something that you are grateful for. I'm not going to ask anyone to share what it is, but just keep it in mind as you listen to the rest of this short devotion. At the hospital every weekday, we meet before we start work for a time of prayer and devotion. Every day, Monday to Friday, that is, apart from Wednesdays. Wednesdays are when we split into male and female groups and go to the wards and offer to pray for our patients. And this is a special time, and the offer is rarely refused. The other days of the working week, we meet in the staff room for a short time of worship. At the start of this time together, someone opens in prayer, and it's not unusual for part of the prayer to be, and I've literally translated from the French, what they say in French, "Thank you, Lord, for this time together again this morning. You've given us breath in our lungs. While we were sleeping, we were like dead people, but you've woken us up and allowed us to live and to come and give you glory and praise." At the end of our time together, we share prayer and praise points, and it's not unusual for people to be thankful for safe travel, for family members who visited people in other parts of the country, or for ongoing health, even if they've not been ill recently. Over the years, but especially over the last few months, it's really made me think about our attitudes here in the UK, what we're thankful for and what we take for granted. Are we thankful daily for the breath in our lungs? Do we take waking up each morning as a given? How often do we thank God for simply being alive? Or do we just think that that's our right? If I'm being honest, I know I rarely consciously thank God for the simple but profound fact that I'm breathing and alive. And this demonstrates my innate audacity that I assume I'm going to be alive from one day to the next, and that I don't live each day as intentionally as I possibly should as a result. One of the changes in my prayer life since being in Chad, though, is praying every single time I drive. When I drive out of the hospital gates, every single time I pray, "Lord, give me wisdom and safety." This has been born out of the fact that I'm driving on the other side of the road than I'm used to here in the UK, in a place where the driving rules are different and where you need 360-degree vision to expect the unexpected. This quick arrow prayer has, over the last 10 years, now become a habit, and I found myself praying it here in the UK too when I jump into my car. However, prior to living and working in Chad, I never prayed before I drove anywhere. So it's amazing how different life experiences can shape our habits, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. And when I was reflecting, planning and praying this short talk, the word that kept coming into my head was trust. If we take things for granted like being alive, health, travel safety, that could be construed as having trust in God for those things. What do I mean by that? Some may say that they're not conscious of these things and not worried about them because they know that God's in control and has got them covered. However, I'm more inclined to think that in taking these things for granted, rather than it demonstrating trust, it's more demonstrating the pitfalls known as self-sufficiency, unreliance on God, and independence, things that here in the UK we tend to be experts at. One of the biggest things I've learned in Chad is that overall, life is lived with interdependency, reduced autonomy, and more reliance on God. Now, as with all things where humans are involved, these things can be taken to the extreme and end up being negative. What? How can someone be too interdependent or over-reliant on God? I say this because interdependency or reliance on God can sometimes be used as an excuse not to take responsibility for one's actions. So as with everything in life, there needs to be a balance. Stripping it back to being consciously aware of and grateful to God for what we may deem small things or things that we naturally take for granted or assume gives us a better perspective, in my opinion, and also engenders more trust in God for everything. As someone who tends to be independent, this is a challenge for me, but one that I want to continue to work on. My Chadian colleagues thank God daily for being alive, demonstrating active trust in him from one day to the next. And my prayer is that I will develop this habit of being grateful for the seemingly regular things of life. Again, while I was preparing and reflecting on this devotion, I was reminded of some Bible verses that I had not read or thought about in a long while. but which were taught to me as memory verses when I was a child. And my auntie also wrote them in the front of one of my first Bibles that was given to me on my 7th birthday. And they're from Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. As well as the trusting the Lord part, I think it's the acknowledge him part, also sometimes translated as submit to him or seek him, that I believe I and we need to focus on more. Acknowledge him in the everyday, the mundane, the normal. And then from that, a habit forms, a habit of trust and expectation of God. And then when we are in need of wisdom and guidance, we naturally depend on and ask him. May we all continue to deepen our trust in God, acknowledging him in absolutely everything in life, so that he may continue to give us wisdom, discernment, and hope when we ask him. Amen. I'm just going to finish off with a few slides of prayer points. Before that, though, just my future. Those of you who read my prayer letters will already know this, but after 10 and a half years of being in Guinebor and Chad, I am actually going to be leaving this October after what will be almost 11 years by that point as a long-term mission worker in Chad. I'm going back to Chad in July, the middle of July, and then I'll be there for 3 months and we'll leave in the middle of October. It was not a decision that I made quickly or lightly. Nothing has gone majorly wrong. I'm not leaving because of some major negative reason. It just feels like the end of a season for me personally. The pharmacy that I started off, the reason I went out there was to work in the pharmacy and to do some changes and work processes there. And that's been running independently with the Chadian head of pharmacy for probably about 2 years. But obviously there's been a lot of other things I've been involved with from a management team side of things. But it's definitely the end of a season for me personally. I felt nothing but peace about this decision, and I will relocate initially to the UK. I've put the word initially in there because I've no idea where God might put me next. But I will come back to the UK, most likely back where I was before I went to Chad, which was Torquay in South Devon, and I've got my sending church there, Upton Vale Baptist Church, who have been great support to me. And we mentioned small groups earlier. I've got a great small group there who I still know everybody in it very well, even though I've been out of the country for 10 years. And so that kind of just feels a good base to go back to start my time back in the UK. It's kind of a known in a very unknown time period for me. And it's most likely I'll go back into pharmacy and be a pharmacist somewhere in South Devon, but any more than that I don't know yet. Once I'm back, I'll still be on the books with BMS for 3 months, and so that will take me to kind of Christmas, New Year, till I need to find a job in the UK. So the last couple of slides are just about prayer points. So how can you pray? So we have now 145 Chadian staff, which when I first got there in January of 2016, we had 65. So the workforce has more than doubled, and just shows, again, the hospital has physically grown, and the number of patients that we receive has grown a lot as well. Pray for them. You can imagine working in 45 degrees is not easy when there's not air conditioning in the majority of the department, and so pray for energy, good health, and compassionate hearts for the patients that they serve. Pray for the 7 of us international staff with various organisations, some BMS and some with other organisations, as we work in a culture and language that's not our first, with the challenges and blessings that this brings. And pray that patients will continue to trust the hospital. I've alluded to this a little bit already, but the bulk of our patients are Muslim. The area of Guinebor too is a very heavily Muslim population. About 95%, I would say, of our patients would follow Islam, but they are knowingly coming to a Christian hospital. We don't hide that fact. It's not blasted in people's faces, but we've got Psalm 23 verse 1 printed outside in French and Chadian Arabic. We have Bibles by the inpatient beds. We show the Jesus film in the waiting areas, and that's done through the hospital chaplains that we have. We have 3 of them, and they are from Ethiopia, all 3 of those families. They are evangelical Christians from Ethiopia, and they live in the village of Guinebor. So pray for them as they speak with the patients and also their neighbours and friends out in the village of Guinebor as well. And then lastly, pray for the management team as they lead the hospital forward. There's been lots of changes in the last few years, especially around governance and finance. That needs to continue on. We're on a process of that, so pray for us in that and the joys of leading a growing hospital. And if you can pray for me as I go back to Chad in July, as I've said, for the last 3 months, and hand over my roles. I've already done some handover, but that needs to be finished off before I come back in the middle of October. So that's everything I've got to share with you. Thanks for having me, and I will be around at the end if anyone's got any questions. And thank you.